Next one's going to be a long story. It's called The House That Death Forgot, written by Josh Parker. Melinda hated driving at night. She did her best to avoid it. Short trips to the store, if she just realized she ran out of tampons or had nothing for dinner after getting home, that sort of thing happened now and then, but she did her best not to go out after dark unless someone was coming to pick her up. So naturally, she found herself on the longest drive of her life tonight, with no moon, few stars, swirling clouds above her, and acres of forest on either side. As so many unpleasant things in her life, this was her father's fault. She hadn't seen or spoken to the bastard in 15 years, but just after falling asleep tonight— no, that was wrong. It would be yesterday by this time. Out of the blue, her phone rang, and his voice was on the other end. "I need you, Melly. Please come. Now." He'd said just that, and then the line went dead. Pardon me. The old ass was probably drunk, but he'd never called her before, not since she was a child, and he was still trying to convince her mother to take him back. It felt like she had been dreaming, waking up to hear his voice again after all these years. It sounded like he was crying. His voice sounded just the same as the last time she'd heard it. As though in a dream, she had risen, dressed, and gotten in the car. She was well out of town and halfway to his old place before realizing that she had no way of knowing if he even still lived there. She received updates from her mother from time to time over the years about where he was. The last time she'd heard from her mother about him was 7 years ago. Had he ever stayed in one place that long? Not to her recollection. She'd been 7 when her mother had finally had enough and showed him the door. Prior to that, a move had come every few months. The house that they had been living in was their longest stay in one place, a full 16 months. It turned into 2 years after that, and then the next house had been the one she left when she moved out on her own. In all that time, she heard from him sporadically at best, and had finally decided it was best to simply forget about him. Until the night. She had found out after a 2-hour drive that she had been right to wonder if he was still in the same place. His last known address was a sketchy apartment in a low-income area of the town she had grown up in. Had he been number 24 or number 42? Maybe it was 14. It definitely had a 4. It didn't matter. His name wasn't on any of the buzzers. Bastard! Her drunk of a father had called her at night, all but demanding she come to him for reasons he didn't even feel were important enough to tell her over the phone, and then just expected that she would know where he lived now. In a flurry of rage, she turned and marched back to her car, slamming the door and starting off in the direction she came. She was so angry she didn't even look where she was going, and missed her turnoff. The next thing she knew, she was on this lonely stretch of road. Cars were sparse, but she took some comfort in the fact that she would pass one every half hour or so. Her dashboard clock now read 2:27 a.m. She had been driving for more than 5 hours since leaving her house, at night. Every 5 minutes or so, she checked her cell phone. Ever since realizing she was lost, she had checked her phone and found no bars at all. She even stopped at a gas station. Closed, of course. Just sure there would be some service around here somewhere, but nothing. Take stock of your life, Melly, she thought. You're over 30, you hate your job, and you and your mother don't get along. You haven't seen or spoken to your father in just under half your life. You have no time for friends or a relationship thanks to the aforementioned job you hate, and now here you are, trapped on a road you've never been on before, at night, and you can't even so much as call Amma, let alone check Google Maps. Smart lady you are. She briefly considered stopping and flagging down the next car that passed. She quickly realized the futility of that plan. Any car on this road would also have no service. So there was nothing for it. She'd have to drive until she saw a house. She'd feel bad for waking someone up, but there was no choice. She needed to find her way back to the main highway. But so far, all that she could see on either side was trees. Mile after mile of trees. No lights shining through the boughs, no sign that anyone had ever been here, except that there was a road and people were obviously still driving on it. There weren't even any road signs other than the mile markers. Had she really found the middle of nowhere? She was just in the middle of this thought when her headlights illuminated something just up the road. A square wooden sign, obviously made by someone other than the government. This wasn't a gas/food/lodging sign, or a mile marker, or a distance to sign. This looked like the kind of signs advertising a private business was nearby. She slowed down to read it. Granny Royce's Roadhouse. Come stay the night at Granny's. She'll take good care of you. Room, board, low prices. Next exit. Her heart sped up. She certainly wasn't interested in spending a night at Granny Royce's, but every business had a phone. At the very least, she'd have a map, or know the way back to the highway. She decided she would stop there. She almost missed the turn. Granny Royce's Roadhouse was buried at the back of a long dirt driveway, secluded amid the trees. She was almost past the little dirt road that led back to it before realizing it was there. She skidded to a stop and turned in. The little house lay ahead. It was 2 stories and looked to have about 8 to 10 rooms. Big for a home, but small for anything announcing room and board. She got closer and looked for a vacancy sign. Nothing. It wasn't that the sign wasn't lit. There was no sign. The porch light was on, and the front of the building was illuminated by that light and by her headlights. No signs of any kind. She almost wondered if she'd gotten the wrong place, but she was certain that she had seen no other exits between this house and the sign announcing it. She paused in the driveway and took out her cell again. Still no service. She did a quick search for any available wireless signals. To her complete lack of surprise, there were none, not even any secured. There's no one here but me, she thought. At this point, she wouldn't be surprised to find the house empty as well, but the light was on, and this was supposed to be a roadhouse. Someone should be manning the front desk. She got out of the car and headed for the front porch. As she turned around to make sure the lights flashed when she hit the lock button on her fob, she thought she could see a flash of movement in the trees, something human-shaped. She stopped and looked again. Nothing. She decided she imagined it. At the front door, she hesitated. If it really was a roadhouse, then she should be able to just go on in. But what if she got the wrong house? If she tried the door and just walked in, she could find herself arrested out here in buttfuck nowhere. Cautiously, she tried the knob. It turned. She pressed gently on the door. It opened. Relief flooded through her when she saw that she was in a small but tastefully decorated foyer that had obviously been repurposed as an admissions area. A quaint desk with an honest-to-God guest book had been placed in the far right corner, and some chairs had been set out, along with magazines on a table. She read the titles briefly: Mademoiselle, Blue Book, The New Country Life, Arts and Architecture, before turning her attention to the little desk. There wasn't a computer. That was a cute touch. It was like the house from a past era. Perhaps old Granny Royce really didn't like modern technology. There was, however, a little bell, just like there would have been in 1929. It wasn't even the round silver kind you slapped to ring. It was a little porcelain handbell. This place was starting to out-cute her. Please let her have a phone, and please let it use the number plan, not 50s exchanges. She picked up the bell and gave it a shake. For a while, nothing happened. Then she saw a light come on in the back room, and the shadow of an old woman sprang up on the wall. The shadow moved toward her, and within a few seconds she saw its owner, Granny Royce, who perhaps looked like every grandmother in every storybook ever. "Well, goodness me," she said. "My lands! Good morning, dearie. Pardon my tardiness, but it's been a while since we got guests at this hour. Can I take your name, honey?" Granny Royce was smallish, her gray hair tied in a neat bun behind her head, a dress that would have looked like it belonged to a senior citizen in the 20s, and a faded pink sweater. Melinda thought that she looked just like she would have wanted her own grandmother to look like, but her mother's mother had died when she was young, and she'd never met her father's mother. It almost hurt to deny this sweet little woman her business, but nevertheless, she had to get home. "Actually, I'm sorry," she began. "The fact is, I'm lost. I'm not even sure where I am in the direction of." "Oh, you poor thing," said Granny Royce. "You just sit down and let me fix you some tea or something. You must be cold." "Really, thank you, but I'm okay," Melinda said gently. "I just need to use the phone, if I could, or if you've got a map, even that would be lovely. I really only live a couple of hours from here." She trailed off, not knowing if she was even right about that. She easily could have driven those 5+ hours in the wrong direction entirely. "Oh, dear," said the little woman sadly. "I'm sorry, honey, but the phone lines are down. As for a map, well, I used to have one, and if I look I still might, but it's probably quite out of date by now. The highway moved since then, I know that much." Melinda's heart sank. How could her luck get any worse? No phone, cell, or landline, and no map. What could she do? She had to get back home. She was expected to work at 8 a.m. tomorrow. And why were the phone lines down? The weather was coldish but clear. Were they fixing a line nearby? She told Granny Royce the name of her town, but Granny only said, "Believe it or not, I've never heard of that town. What did you say the name was?" She told her again. "Nope, doesn't ring a bell. I'm sorry, but I could not say which direction it's in. Why don't you stay the night, sweetie? I'll give you a discount for your trouble." "Thank you. That's very kind of you. But I have work tomorrow, and I need to get back home. I'm not even sure why I'm out tonight. The only reason I had doesn't seem to matter anymore." "Honey, I would advise trying to drive back that far tonight," Granny Royce said. "Why, it's almost 3 in the morning, and you've not had any sleep. Maybe the lines will be up in the morning, and you can call your work and let them know you'll be late." "That won't work either," she replied. "I'm the opener. No one will be there. No, I'm sorry, I've really got to leave. I'll head in the other direction until I find the road I was on." At that, Granny Royce's expression, already one of kind concern, seemed to shift somewhat to one of fear. She paused, looking at Melinda as though she wanted to say something else to keep her inside. Finally, she said reluctantly, "All right, honey, if you're sure. Just you be careful now. Don't speak to nobody until you're back on the road." That last little warning seemed a little silly. After all, what was Melinda, a little girl? She thanked Granny Royce for her kindness and headed back to the car. About halfway to the car, she remembered thinking she saw something moving in the trees. Her eyes scanned both sides of the secluded little cleared area she was in, looking for anything that appeared to be moving on its own rather than being blown by the slight wind. She saw nothing. Satisfied, she headed for her car. All 4 tires were flat. This is a long one, so I'm going to make this part 1 of several. Hopefully 2, but we'll see.